The clitoris. Let's have a conversation about the clitoris. This piece of anatomy has a history of either being ostracized or being hyper-focused on. What do I mean by that? Well, around the time that Freud started to really deal with sexual issues, he actually went into female psychology and said that when it came to sex, that if a woman is only having an orgasm from the clitoris, then she hasn't reached the full maturity of her orgasm, that this is sort of the immature orgasm. They have not fully developed themselves. To the point then that there's been an entire erasing of the clitoral anatomical structures and the details of female sexual pleasure from anatomy, from the medical books. And it wasn't really until around roughly now, Masters and Johnson's, that the clitoris started to get some emphasis again. And this was sort of seen as a big threat to the industry of the academics, and not so much the academics, but more frankly that most of the academics were men, and that it was a threat to men because now, well, if a woman can have an orgasm and have all this pleasure and it's primary from a clitoris and it's not from penetration, then we are not going to be needed. So there was resistance around that. Well, now fast forward present day, slowly it's happened since going past the 60s, 70s. And now if you go to sex educator, sex expert, sex coach, whatever the fancy word that the people in this industry who give sexual advice are calling themselves, they will almost unanimously tell you that the way to bring a woman pleasure is by focusing on the clitoris. And there's almost been this swing the other direction of, no, it's nothing vaginal. It's like that's not really where a woman experiences her pleasure. The clitoris is the one anatomical structure that is made solely for pleasure. Okay, well, I understand. In a sexual experience, let's make this really realistic. Sexual experience, you're with a person and you ignore their clitoris. You avoid it, in fact. Try not to have any interaction with it at all. Probably going to lead to limited amount of sensation and pleasure. Very true. In fact, you can even bring up the orgasm gap, which is that in especially a heteronormative, heterosexual couple, male, female, together, entering into penetration, man will have an orgasm in the upper 98, 99 percentile of the time, every single time, whereas a woman is more around the 60th percentile, which drastically drops off if they're not in a relationship, goes even lower. So that gap there is the orgasm gap. From my experience, it's not just an orgasm gap, it's not a heterosexual thing, it's a penetrative thing. Meaning that in any of the coaching I've had, whether it's a woman with a woman, a man with a man, and I'll let you figure out how all of that can still work out and be penetrative, there is that same difficulty if you have someone on the receiving side of penetration and someone on the giving side of both being able to achieve not just an orgasm, pleasure, but definitely orgasm too. Now, so where do we want to go with this? Because we're bringing it back to the clitoris. If you focus solely on the clitoris, what ends up happening? I mean, ask pretty much any woman if they have a partner who just goes right to their clitoris, focuses solely on their clitoris, what ends up happening? Well, a lot of times you numb out, feel uncomfortable. Oh, that's too much sensation. It's either too fast, too long, too hard, too much. Or let's say you have an orgasm, then it's like, oh, stop, I need to like integrate this, and then there needs to be a reset time. There's this whole refractory period that comes up. So again, when you start to think of sexual experiences that begin to last longer periods of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, several hours. I mean, there's a book, Magnificent Sex, and when I talk to Dr. Sadia Desla, she loves to tell about this. And I don't know if it's Magnificent Sex or Transcendent Sex, but there is this story in there around a elderly couple, and they say that they have sex once a week, which then the young people laughed at. Oh, we have sex multiple times. But then they realized that the old couple, when they said that they have sex once a week, it was a 3-day event, starting on Friday, going through Sunday, ending sometimes around Monday. So if you think about it from that perspective, if you're just going and focusing on the clitoris, and you're going to this sort of peak, then climactic, and then huge refractory period, well, you're probably not going to be having these extended amounts of lovemaking. So if you're hearing this and I say 2 hours, 3 hours, and you go, oh, come on, Aaron, like that's ridiculous. No, it's not. There actually are ways to be able to have prolonged, extended orgasmic states, which aren't just an episode, it's a state, meaning that you are in an altered state that lasts a longer period of time. If you can imagine meditating for over, an hour, then why can't you enter into pleasure states that then go on for hours? Well, that again is because if you are talking about the clitoris only as something that is then being focused on and isolated as this one anatomical structure, you sort of end up becoming the other side of the coin. And I know that might be hard for some of you out there to really grasp what I'm saying. For others of you though, because I mean, if you're here, you're probably already slightly ahead of the curve in terms of your sexual education. You're wanting to go further. So now start to expand your mind, to not just think of the two sides of the coin, but to actually understand the ecosystem, the economy of pleasure. If you're wanting to, from a physiological perspective, dive into extended states of pleasure, you can't just be in the predominantly sympathetic state. And that is what happens when you focus strictly on the clitoris. It's like lighting a fire. Well, if you're only focusing on the fire, everything burns up. But there's another side to the sympathetic state. There is the parasympathetic state, or the predominantly parasympathetic state, because it's never purely one or the other. If you hear someone just saying, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that one, again, they're making this sort of false dichotomy. Everything works together as a system. So the predominantly parasympathetic state is where you are entering into states of relaxed arousal, whereas opposed to having this experience, you actually start to have this experience, and it can climb and climb. In fact, it's even three-dimensional. It sort of has these cycles that you go through, but are you cycling up into higher states of pleasure? Are you able to actually boost your pleasure capacity? Well, to do that, you need to be able to start to understand that the clitoris is not just this sort of unitary, isolated, dissected, separated part of the body, but it's a part of an entire complex of pleasure. So if we're going to expand your knowledge beyond just the clitoris, you need to start to understand that the clitoris isn't just the glands, the shaft, the body, the legs. It's not also just the vestibular bulbs, if you want to include that as well, but start to look at that entire erectile complex of pleasure and understanding anatomy as a system of pleasure. And you'll soon come across what is called the CUV complex, the clitoral-urethral-vaginal complex. And what that simply means is that they are interconnected. They are interconnected in terms of the nerves, they are interconnected in terms of blood flow, and they sure are interconnected in terms of when you're stimulating one, you more than likely are stimulating all of them. It's sort of like if the clitoris is the base three notes. If you want to say the clitoris, let's bring it back, it's so important, which it is. That would be your do, re, mi. But you still have fa, sol, la, ti. You have the entire arc of notes that make up, music. You have a spectrum of colors. And so if you only ever just focus on one, or you try and remove several of them, you are limiting the possibilities of what you can have. So if you really want to understand how to get the most sensation and pleasure out of your clitoris, then you need to understand how it relates to the urethra and the vagina. And I would even go as far as to say the womb. Because these all start to interplay together. And the thing that creates that interplay is your breath. And most of you are trying to squeeze your muscles and hold your breath to get more pleasure. So here's the one piece of advice that I'm going to leave you with. If you want to start to activate your entire system and start to actually feel blood flow rushing throughout the entire CUV complex and experience your pleasure system as a system, but not just one isolated structure that then is specific to one type of act or one type of toy or one type of partner that finally got it, but that you start to master your own body, it's called the inhale push. And it's really simple. You're going to take a nice deep breath in, feel it filling up your belly, your lungs, but especially that pelvic floor. You're going to feel that pelvic floor gently push out. As you take a breath in, the oxygen fills up. It might be easier for you to think of my lungs are filling first, my stomach's filling first, and then my pelvic floor. And as you start to get used to it, it's that pelvic floor that fills up first. The air, like a lung, fills up at the bottom, and then everything else expands front, back, and all around. This is going to ensure that the most amount of blood flow is going to go to your entire anatomical structure of pleasure, all of your sexual organs, because it's in that delivery of blood that you'll get the delivery of oxygen that fires off all the nerves and brings you into those, not just sympathetic, predominantly sympathetic states of pleasure that's going to lead you into one peak orgasm, but it's going to help you stay in the higher states where simply your meditation, your new quote unquote drug, is going to be pleasure that you can have inside yourself and share with a partner. Inhale, push.